So thank you so much for joining us for today's workshop on clean tech in the agriculture sector. I would like to begin by acknowledging first with gratitude and respect that the lands on which Foresight operates are the traditional and ancestral and unceded territories of the First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. So first, we will begin by just laying out the agenda for today. I'll begin by providing a bit of an introduction, and then Stephanie from Genome Alberta will be speaking about some emerging initiatives for ag tech ventures in Alberta. And following that, we will have our panel discussion on clean tech in the agriculture sector, moderated by Sean O'Connor, the Managing Director for Conexus Venture Capital and Emertech. But before that, I'd like to share a bit of context around why we're here regarding Foresight and our AgriNext initiative. So Foresight is Canada's clean tech accelerator, and we're working to fuel the transformation to a green economy by supporting clean tech innovation through acceleration, adoption, capital, exports, and ecosystems, which includes our accelerator programs, innovation challenges, and industry matchmaking, our events, showcase and pitch events, and investor matchmaking, and ultimately bringing together the network of Canadian innovation stakeholders to accelerate clean tech innovation. And so AgriNext is our initiative established by Foresight to drive the growth and scaling of clean tech innovation, solving the environmental and competitiveness pain points of the agriculture sector. So through this initiative, we want to show that some of the seemingly conflicting objectives in agriculture through, increased productivity, efficiency, and improved environmental sustainability, that they truly can be addressed as one united goal through the adoption of ag tech innovations, such as the ones that we'll be learning about and hearing from today. So with that, before we get to the panel, I'd like to introduce Stephanie Lim from Genome Alberta to speak about some emerging initiatives for ag tech ventures in Alberta.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And thank you so much for inviting Genome Alberta today to talk a little bit about our initiatives. My name is Stephanie Lam. I'm the Agricultural Program Officer for Genome Alberta. And as many of you know, genomic innovations can contribute to clean tech to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And this can be from genetically selecting for lower methane emitting animals, from bioengineered microbes to produce biofuels, and really anything implementing genomic solutions for biofuel production. Genome Alberta specifically is a not-for-profit organization as well, and we help to accelerate genomic research programs to improve different sectors in Alberta. So this includes agriculture and agri-food. And in our portfolio, we've funded over $560 million with over $170 million funding contributing to agriculture and agri-food research. So our main goal is to support partnerships between industry and researchers to meet their demands. Regarding clean tech specifically, this is a sector in our portfolio that we want to expand and invest in. One example of our projects that we've supported is a $12.5 million project which used genetics to identify which cows produce more milk, but also produce less methane emissions. And this project resulted in improving Canada's cattle breeding programs for more profitable and sustainable cattle. So this is just one example of how genomics can be implemented to solve problems in this ecosystem. And how do we do this? We run programs and we have multiple ongoing past and future programs. One of our past programs is the Innovation in Agricultural Genomics program, which was done in partnership with results-driven agricultural research. And in this program, we identified innovative projects that were able to advance genomic technologies or tools with quick or immediate benefits to our end users. We also have the ongoing project, the Genomic Applications Partnership Program, also known as the GAP program. And this addresses end user needs as well. And we help by supporting these academic and industry partnerships. And lastly, very recently, Genome Canada announced that they're going to initiate a new challenge-driven program. This will be focused on climate smart agriculture and food systems. So focus on food security and sustainability in the face of climate change. So it's a very timely program that will be announced very soon in the spring. So if anything related to genomics, microbiology, proteomics, metabolomics, or bioinformatics technologies or tools can be applied to accelerate your technology, I would highly encourage you to connect with us. We'd be happy to talk to you about it and help you accelerate that. And so thank you so much for letting Genome Alberta speak, and I'm going to hand it back to you, Andrea.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And so with that, I will introduce Sean O'Connor, the moderator for today's panel. Sean is the managing director for Conexus Venture Capital and Emertech. Emertech is a new $60 million early stage Canadian agtech fund. And prior to Conexus, Sean was on the leadership team of a Canadian fintech company, Grow Technologies. And so I'll allow him to ask the panel to introduce themselves. And with that, thank you so much and take it away.
Awesome. Thanks for having us here today. We really appreciate it. And Andrea did a really good job at Foresight in putting together a pretty unique panel in the sense that we've got everything from the dirt all the way up to the digitization of the crop. So I'm excited to have, Steve, we'll kind of go in that direction as well, starting in the soil with Steve, getting into understanding the crop itself through Xavier, and then moving over to Ken at the digitization of the crop as it enters into the bin. So perhaps we'll go through introductions in that regard as well, knowing we don't have a ton of time and want to keep it relatively brief. Steve, can you jump in and introduce DMS?
Sure. So my name is Steve Siciliano. I'm the CEO, one of the co-founders of Environmental Material Science. I'm also a soil science professor at the University of Saskatchewan with about 30 years of experience in soil science research. And environmental material science uses innovative soil sensors and biostimulants to improve soil health and dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions as we deal with issues such as salinity and other sort of impacts on soil ecosystems.
Awesome, thanks. And Xavier, I'll pass it over to you as we go from the soil into the crop. Introduce yourself and Picketa.
Definitely. Hi, I'm Xavier Hébert-Couturier from Picketa Systems, where our technology, we can assess the nutrient concentrations from scanning the leaf tissue. So giving similar to what an agricultural lab would give you in a week, we can do it on site instantly. Yeah.
Okay, right on. And now we go from the crop itself into the start of digitization of the supply chain. Ken, can you take it away in VeriGrain?
Sure. So once the crop is growing and ends up in storage, that's where we step in. So our goal, and let me back up. I'm Ken Jackson. I'm the CEO and a co-founder of VeriGrain. So what we do is that we provide digitization of the grain as it goes into and out of storage on the farm. And how we do that is rather unique in that it's through the sampling acquisition and then the management of that data at the time. So our whole goal is to provide both the grower and the buyer with a lot greater transparency and also traceability.
Awesome, thanks, Ken. And I'm super excited to be a part of this today because I'm a huge believer that one of the biggest opportunities we have here in Canada right now is at the intersection of ag tech and clean tech, where we've been looking at trying to solve different ambitious plans around climate change in Canada, many of which we should continue to focus on. But the one kind of forgotten area that seems to now be really top of mind is how big of a role agriculture can play and how quickly we can change the narrative of agriculture being a contributor to climate change to actually a combatant. I'd like to start with kind of asking around the origin stories themselves. Did you start as a clean tech company or an ag tech company? And then at what point, what made you drawn into the ag sector? I'm going to go in reverse order here and Ken, to you. So did you start as an ag tech or a clean tech? And then what made you enter into the ag tech space?
Sure. So I guess I see clean tech as a subset of ag tech. So I've, in general, I've always considered us, part of the sort of ag tech community. And I guess everybody likes to put things in boxes, and so like I say, in general, I've always sort of seen us as an ag tech company. But as this clean tech discussion came about, and the sort of all the issues going around that, it occurred to me that we actually tick a few boxes in the Cleantech space, which is really optimizing or ensuring that what we grow is optimally utilized. So make sure that environmental stress that we're putting on doesn't go to waste. For example, the grain doesn't rot in the bin because somebody missed it. It was hot and wet going in, and I think even a broader issue around that or connected to that is understanding the qualities, the characteristics of the grain that does go into storage, so not only the grower can find optimal use for those, the buyers are actually happy to pay more, and they're looking for that. And from a buyer perspective, the sort of logistics management of understanding with greater certainty and greater trust what's actually stored out there. And that ultimately, when that truck rolls into the driveway, that the grain on it, or that it dumps, is going to equal what the expectation is. And so, that's a problem literally every day. The trucks roll in the driveway, and it's not what was expected. So, going back to my comment about, it's just so vital that we ensure that what gets growing gets optimally utilized, and that's kind of our piece, or our part in that Cleantech space is making, it's about the efficiency of utilization of all the inputs and the environmental stress. And we're in a very unique position to provide sort of some very, very real time and very accurate feedback on, what the result was of those inputs.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that the driving efficiency in the logistics of the supply chain is often an overlooked area of how much waste we're seeing in the agriculture space. It's really easy to say, hey, we save this farmer a whole bunch of fuel, farmer saves a bunch of money, a lot less fuel used and a lot less impact on the environment. It's a lot more difficult and nuanced to get into how much waste occurs along the supply chain, particularly at the intersection of where you guys are and taking the crop and actually getting it to the right place. Xavier, can you walk through how you entered into this space? First and foremost, where you started, as whether it was an ag tech or a clean tech company, and then what made you choose to focus on the agriculture sector?
Yeah, absolutely. We started similar to Ken. We started with the end user in mind. We had farming experience on the team. We were 4 engineering students at the time. And we actually met at Dominic House, which just happens to be his 5th generation potato farm he's been working on his whole life. So we had our user right there. So we went and checked what are the wastes happening, not just for clean tech, but really if a waste is happening, it's something that's not getting utilized. A bit like Ken mentioned, if you are able to go into the system and make it easier to be more efficient, to enable what's grown to get to shelves to get eaten, better quality. You're not just having the sustainability aspect to it, but you're also improving operations. So we looked at what was the issue with the fertilization of plants. So it's about 10% of greenhouse gas released in agriculture is through fertilizers. I realized it was kind of a spray and pray approach, and there's self-driving variable rate tractors, but the information going into it was kind of the bottleneck there. To applying it on a wider scale. So that's where we started, was, okay, let's get a specific need and then find a technology to solve it. And the good thing about working with ag tech is that if you do make something more efficient, you're getting more impacts on not just the lives of your users, but on the environment as well, because the soil's right there.
Yeah, I think as a slight departure from the ag tech, clean tech intersection and what you guys are doing, from the venture capital's landscape, and I know our team's talked with you in the past about this, VCs love the idea of being in the stepping stone towards autonomous agriculture in the future. And we hate the idea of having to use our money to do that over the next decade. So when you have companies like what you're building, Xavier, where you're actually taking a step towards autonomous agriculture, but in a way that is providing an ROI to the farmer today. It's both a rare and valuable opportunity. And certainly at the end of the spectrum, Ken would be there as well, the digitization of the supply chain. Sorry, I have lots of questions there, but I want to give Steve some time to talk about EMS in terms of, you have a different path in how you ended up in ag space, with your expertise in soil. Can you give a little bit of kind of the origin story behind EMS, how you think about EMS as an ag tech or clean tech company, and then why you're now starting to dip your toes, well, jumping full into the ag space, I should say.
Yeah, so EMS started after about 15 years of research that I worked with Federated Co-op. So for those of you who aren't in the West, Federated Co-op is Western Canada's largest supplier of fuel, not the largest supplier of fertilizer, but basically they service farm communities. And one of the big challenges was, so we started as a clean tech because they needed a way to sustainably clean the soils. And they knew they should not dig it up and dispose of the landfill, because that's just a bad idea, especially fertile soils. So I worked with them and we developed a series of approaches, basically biostimulants, working with the ability to kind of stimulate the soil health and improve it. And along the way, we had to invent some sensors. And so the Soil Sense network, which we've ended up developing, are kind of a brand new novel type of sensor that allows us to sense in real time soil health. And so I was doing this to make sure if we clean things. But along the way, after we built it, I realized we'd actually accidentally and also invented a carbon sequestration detection system. We can measure the carbon going in and the carbon going out. And I was like, oh, this is going to be really important because many of my colleagues have spent their entire careers worrying about soil organic carbon. And so then we started looking more heavily into where can we bring this clean tech technology to help sort of the broad acre and the irrigation systems to be more profitable with less inputs and better for soil health. I'm a strong believer that if we improve soil health, we improve the sustainability of the ag system. And if we can do it in a way that improves farmers' returns, then it's going to be widely adopted. And so we kind of came at it that we were trying to solve a clean tech problem. And along the way, we invented a technology and an AI system that can readily port into concerns of the farming community here in Western Canada and probably around the world. So we ended up, that's how we ended up in this space. And then as we continued to sort of develop these sensors, now we've got sensors that we think are going to be applicable to broad acre problems that occur in the agricultural space, all again dedicated towards improving sort of overall soil health. And the key part there is that it's something called yield stability. So you don't really care if your crop gets great yields one year, if the next year it might bottom out. You want your crops to have fairly stable yields. So even in bad years, they're going to do okay. And our technology can help with that. It can also help predict it. In many ways, farmers and venture capitalists are very, very similar in that only about 10% of farmland actually makes money typically. There's a good Iowa study showing this, that 90% of farmland breaks even and only about 10% pays for the farm. And so if we can change that ratio just a little bit, if the VCs can change their number of home runs just a little bit, it dramatically improves the bottom line. So that's what we're trying to do.
And so Steve, when you're thinking through what the farmer wants to be able to create a consistent crop, or what the metrics are that you want to be able to help a farmer prove what they're doing is environmentally friendly or that they're sequestering carbon, how do you actually display that? Like, what are the metrics that you're tracking here to have that conversation or enable them to have that conversation?
Yeah, so, they're not being paid right now really to fix carbon. There's just some ratios. So one of the questions that's going to come up as we go in the future is sort of understanding, can we move beyond some sort of, fixed ratio dictated by the regulators as to how much fuel you use, how much fertilizer you use, that's how much greenhouse gases, to actually soil specific. And specifically, Xavier linked to this is this need with precision farming. If you don't actually have precise information of what's happening in the field, then as a result, your precision farming is going to be substandard. So one of the ideas that we track basically is microbial, temperature, moisture, gas movements, and hopefully soon direct analysis of nutrients in the field. And how we envision it happening is that we'll be able to provide those feedbacks in what I would term problem areas or representative areas. There's always some fields that are less productive than others. And our equipment can be used to probably diagnose and get real-time feedback. If you try X, did it work better or not? Because there's a lot of reasons why plant yield might differ, and you don't want to have to wait the full year to figure that out.
Awesome. And Xavier, when you think about end state, and you guys are a super successful company, you're across North America and making this huge impact, what are the metrics that you're going to be able to stand up to say, this is what we're tracking, this is how we're helping combat climate change?
Yeah. Yes, a bit similar to what Steve's talking about. We're not there just yet. We're really focusing on improving the lab process and being able to give those metrics. But being able to count the greenhouse gas reduction, what's actually uptaken versus runoff from the soil from an application of fertilizer, is it within the plant or is it just runoff, right? So uptake estimation is something that we're really interested in doing. As well as giving better recommendations on what to apply in terms of fertilizer. So taking a look at what's the needs of different plants in different regions and actually varying it across different fields or sections.
I can't tell you about how excited I am to see a future where that's enabled. Living in southern Saskatchewan here, should drive around in the summer and see our lakes after the fertilizer runoff has taken hold. It can be pretty deadly in terms of what it means to the local ecosystems.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to take a lot of different parts of the system, right? It's a big complex system. Like one part of it is getting to the minimum effective dose being applied. The other part of it's having better types of fertilizer that gets uptaken. And then the application of it is a different part of it, right? So we're really focusing on the information side, and hopefully as we develop into a company that way, there'll be other parts of the industries to take kind of the application machinery as well as better products to apply.
That's a really good point to put in there. And Steve, I'll pass it back to you in a second here, but I think that we often think that one company is looking to solve a huge part, and it's really not the case, right? Like understanding what nutrients need to be given to a plant is very different from the product that actually needs to be given to it that can sit and stay around the plant to be used when it's ready as opposed to when it's applied. Sorry, Steve, you looked like you wanted to say something. Then I want to pass it back to Ken for a different question.
Yeah, I was just going to build off what Xavier's bringing up and ask him some questions, because I was just talking to somebody about, in the West here, we do a lot of work on nitrogen use efficiency, and different lines of canola, for example, have different NUEs, and it's dependent on the time and where you want to be. And I could easily foresee a future in which, with your systems, we could be going back and saying, a farmer isn't planting one line, he's planting 5 or 6, and they're all based off the NUEs, and they'll differ between fields. And I could readily see that sort of, because people I work with are really deeply concerned about nitrogen use efficiency so that we can minimize fertilizer input because of the cost and associated greenhouse gas and the runoff. So I think that ability, I don't know, have you been in the East, like Maritime's very different systems than the prairies. Do you guys hear some interest in that sort of idea too out there?
Yeah, I've spent some time in Saskatchewan prior to the company, but I have fond memories being around the province. And we do like right now we'll have a station for real-time analysis in New Brunswick and PEI. We're looking to expand Canada-wide for next season with potato growers. So unfortunately, it wouldn't be directly Saskatchewan, but maybe southern Alberta, Manitoba, those places. But just like you mentioned, having that variable rate application for different for nitrogen specifically, for greenhouse gas wise, and then for the micronutrients to get the best yield out of it. That's kind of the long-term, I guess, value prop, right? Our entry into the market is being able to improve upon the process, and then the longer terms one is being able to say, hey, we can increase yield by this much, we can increase quality by this much, which will take much more work to kind of prove out and get those case studies. But definitely it's something we're looking forward to.
Awesome. I want to take us in a bit of a different direction here, particularly if we have other ag tech founders or people who are interested in jumping into the space. And Ken, you guys have been commercializing for a while now here. Ag tech is it's a unique space in trying to build traction, in trying to get farmers to use your product, and they're constantly being sold 1,000 things. They have generally 30 to 40 growing seasons in their career. Most years they have all of or a lot of their net worth at stake in the fields. how do you approach sales when it comes to farmers? How have you found ways to get them to trust in using VeriGrain? What's that process looked like? And any advice you have for founders looking to drive sales in the ag tech space?
Yeah, great question. As I've been told from a few different sources, if every farmer took on every product that would make them another $10 an acre for a buck an acre, they'd be making $5,000 an acre. But obviously, it doesn't happen. And you're right, John. That like I think the number I've heard, your average farmer has to make 160 individual decisions about, what to do on their farm every year. I mean, it's an incredibly complex environment to manage. So it's one of probably the biggest challenges with getting growers is twofold. One is getting them to understand that your product is of value to them, and they should be paying attention to what you're doing as opposed to the 26 other guys that are trying to sell them something. But a big part of that is finding your channels, finding those appropriate channels to market. So in our case, and I've been through quite a number of products, worked with the ag retail dealers, the retail sort of input suppliers for other things, and with VeriGrain, there's some of those channels that are applicable, but we actually realized that because we bring quite a benefit to the buyer, the grain buyers, the processors, anyone acquiring grain that wants to know what they're getting and have that confidence that what'll be delivered. They actually are a great channel to market for us because they have a vested interest and a relationship with the grower. So that's that in the last number of months here, we've actually kind of refocused our go-to-market via the grain buyers who deal with dozens, if not hundreds, of growers each. So I think as you just have to look at what do you have for a product and what is the fit with the various channels, whether you're going through FCL and Flamin, or you're going through the guys that sell the engines and wheels. And by the way, they only really care about engines and wheels. They don't care about the little stuff, even though they will tell you that they do. So there's just some hard lessons to learn about what how to go to market, and hey, you can go direct, but it all, at the end of it, it comes down to, what is that cost of customer acquisition? How can you get noticed? How can you deliver your product to market? So it is a question which requires many beer to figure out.
You're right. It's not one that, and it's also not kind of a one size fits all answer either, as you were mentioning. It's each path for a company is unique. What I can say is, if you can get in the door and start working with these farmers, and you have to provide them with value and ROI year one. They don't give you second chances, but if you can do that, holy smokes, does validation go a long ways in this space. Xavier, would love to hear your perspective. I know you guys are just starting commercialization or getting there, but even with respect to putting together on-farm pilots, that in itself is its own art. How have you gone through the path in terms of being able to get the product out to see if it actually works in the early days?
Yeah, and that's a big hurdle when you're getting a new product to market, is actually being able to test those, show the results. And especially with agriculture, it's a long season. Like you need to wait a full year to get validation. It makes it pretty difficult. So you really need to plan out ahead. I like what Ken said about the different channels, understanding the dynamics of the markets and who is responsible of who, of what, determines a lot of things, and also finding kind of what qualifies a good customer. For us was good, because if they're already sampling, if they're already spraying fertilizer every week, then our value props hit directly, right? So we can integrate much faster than trying to convince like a farmer who might not see the value in sampling at all. We'll not start there, right? We'll get there once we've proven it out with the people already taking in that data and know the value of it. that's kind of where we're starting out at. It's something we're continuing to kind of build on, but like you mentioned, having kind of the advocate or someone you can point to who believes in it, that's been really great. We've seen kind of agronomists be our champion users, since they want nutritional data to be able to give better recommendations. That's kind of their core competency. So empowering them, you know, the people know each other and trust each other. If you can really get into the community and show value, like you said.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a good reminder that a lot of the basics here. Sorry, I'll say one quick thing. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll try and read them as we go on. But I think what you're saying there is a good reminder that, you know, ag tech is different. It's a bit of a different playbook than other tech startups, but it really rhymes like a lot of them as well. You know, in terms of making sure you're not just smashing your head against the wall for buyers who are never going to be interested, or at least not going to be early adopters, like actually going through and qualifying yourself if they are truly a prospective buyer that makes sense. You know, Steve, as you think through, you know, what pilots could look like for you guys as you're approaching this space, particularly with a strong knowledge of how you work in the world of academia, how do you think through, you know, early days of traction and what you're trying to do with DMS?
Yeah, so I think the issue there is to identify sort of the early adopter customer who would then lead you into customers who look like those customers. And that's what we've done on the Cleantech side. Work with that early adopter. And I was nodding when Xavier was talking about agronomists, because that's how I see it initially going. I think there's some farming groups here out in the West that are quite interested in the idea of the soil health. Think about a lot of the ranching community, as well as the irrigation community. So the idea would be is to establish a pilot trial there, and understand what, you know, look, AI is great, but if you don't know what is the customer values, you need to make the system to give them what they want, and similarly. So that's how I would see it occurring initially, on one of those sort of ideally probably irrigation based, or perhaps some of these new cluster trials that are about to go in. There's some long-term trials that we could put, so there's been long-term agronomic trials going on in the West for over 100 years that we can put our soil sensors in, and thereby grain validation data, and then move from that to the next customer that looks exactly like that, and build that network organically. And how I think about it is that, you know, if we think about just from the startup experience, if you think about social media apps and marketplace, you know, they have these network effects, but we also have network effects in the ag tech, because what happens is that it's not the same. It's not about buyers and sellers, but it's as you get more and more adopters, that your ability to deliver value to your next person actually goes up tremendously, because you can say these 30 farms, this is what they saw, and this is where you are, and this is what they needed. And so that's how I would see it, Sean, going in with some of those expert early adopters on a very low cost trial and promising almost nothing, because you're not sure. Because I hear what Xavier says, you know, we're on this yearly cycle, and if you blow your year, you're never going to go back in, right? Because they're never going to want to do it again.
Yeah, and the yearly cycle is one that, even as an investor who's, you know, stumbling into this space, because my background was in the generalist tech space, the yearly cycles is something that is unique in a lot of ways to ag tech, particularly when you're still first trying to get traction just here in North America. Like, you can offset it by trying to go down to South America or Australia or other places, but it means that your sales window and your window for actually getting an audience with the buyer is condensed every year, because there are parts of the year where it doesn't matter what the heck your product is. They have no interest in even evaluating it, because it's just so far out from being top of mind. I want to take a question here from Gino Jensen. It's building a bit on what you were talking about, or in terms of proving that pilot out with EMS, in the sense that you're going to get farmers using your product at EMS because you're going to be able to improve their yields, reduce their costs. You're going to allow them to run their farm more efficiently. But the other piece of information that you're going to be capturing is their ability to sequester carbon through the practice of farming. Have you thought through what that business model could look like in the future in terms of, you know, incentivizing emission reduction on the farmer's behalf? Would love to hear your take on that, Steve. And then afterwards, Ken or Xavier, if you guys have thoughts on where your product could fit into a carbon credit world.
That's a very hard question, Sean, because a lot of it is a highly regulated product. And in the West here, we're kind of in a hard spot, right? So about 25 years ago, we started adopting minimum tillage to improve yield. That then adopts with new ag tech technologies, which reduce environmental impact, reduce the amount of fuel. It's all a great news story. But as a result, over the last 25 or 30 years, we've really built back up that organic carbon storage. And so how do you then show this sort of sequestration that's occurring during normal cropping activities? And it's a difficult question because that number is changing by less than a percentage per year in terms of organic matter. I don't believe anyone can take a look at the total organic carbon stock year by year and see a meaningful difference. It's just statistically impossible because of variability issues. So how EMS is approaching it is say, look, you've got this total carbon stock. I don't know what it is. It's kind of like, I don't know how much any of us weigh. What I do know is that if everybody here, doesn't matter what your weight is, if you're eating if you're having cookies and chips every day, your weight's going to go up. And so we can track what goes in and track what goes out. And then just like on financial accounting, if it's going up, we're pretty sure that eventually that carbon number is going to increase. I think there's a couple things there that really help. If you do track that, especially continuously over time, and it's verifiable, so it goes to a secure database, and you can look in the records, then I think that that becomes a very solid basis. One of the things we struggle with in Cleantech is, for example, if you go to a site and you assess the soil, remember that when you assess the soil, you're measuring 1 tablespoon of soil. So if someone goes to a quarter section and measures your soil carbon, they've measured a tablespoon of that soil. So next year when they go back, the number is going to be different. And so every time, no matter who's doing it, if they change how they do it in any way, your numbers change. And so I believe that by having a continuous measurement over a long period of time, you're able to show that long-term trend. And I think that that will be convincing to the regulators to show that sort of carbon sort of sequestration. As part of it, you know, the nice thing about EMS's sensors is they can be readily configured to measure nitrous oxide as well, which is normally the nitrous oxide, I personally believe, is probably the market killer here in a good way. Because the more nitrous oxide you blow off, guess what? You've just blown off all your fertilizer. That's bad. It's a huge greenhouse gas. It's 300 times the carbon force of carbon. And so it's really bad. And we know how to mitigate that. We know, let's not fertilize when it's wet. Let's talk about nitrification inhibitors. And so our sensors can sort of in real time be able to talk about that. That would be the plan to go forward. So ironically, I'd probably go more on nitrogen management first, then have the carbon, because the carbon sequestration is so slow. But over the course of a year, you can easily imagine a scenario where we're like, well, look, your management practice this year, you lost 30% of your nitrogen to the air. That was really bad, and it was bad for the planet. So I think I've wandered a little bit, Sean, but I think that that's probably the approach I would use in this stage.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Like you started off by saying answering that question is really hard, and I completely agree. But that's also what makes it so interesting and so fascinating. Like I'm so ready for this phase of carbon sequestration theater that we're going through right now to be over with, where we're taking, protected forestry and attaching carbon credits to it, or it's not really going to, we're not actually making a meaningful change from what the base state will be, and seeing how we can actually change our behaviors in some of these large industries that is causing, a departure from the current practices. It's going to be fascinating to see. It's not going to be easy, and certainly it's great having bright minds like yours looking at this. Xavier, how do you think about your technology intersecting the world of carbon credits, carbon trading, and incentivizing carbon sequestration?
Yeah, we don't think about it much right now. If I'm honest, it's something it's a very complex system that we would like to get into eventually. But right now, I don't think the data is there to get enough repeatable data to really have an impact right now. Although having the uptake of the nutrients from soil to plant gives a bit better complete picture of what's going on, as well as if you can stop a spray before it happens, if you don't need it as well, that'd be another impact where we are. So yeah, not sure how to get into that one. So right now we're just focusing on how can we give the best information on the nutrients, and from that point, it'll be kind of a step up to taking this information and building an actual system around it that works in different regions for different crops. Yeah.
Awesome. And I think we're out of time here, but Ken, I will pass it over to you as well, as you think about measuring and providing value back specific to the world of combating climate change. Where's VeriGrain's head at in terms of what that means in the short or long term with your technology?
Yeah, we just started looking at this literally about 4 months ago, and anybody that's looked at carbon knows that there's a lot to it, and probably a lot fewer answers and a lot more questions. But where our interest started from is that we have this really unique data set for that's the most accurate real-time data on farm stored grain. And about 40% of grain is carbon. There's the related biomass that goes with that. So there's sort of, that raises some questions. Is there some opportunity here to look at, okay, what is is there something that we can get out of that information and leverage that to into a carbon credit for the grower? So I'm going to say that I know a lot less than I need to have the discussion on this, but we're actually having had a series of meetings with companies that are very knowledgeable in this area, and we're starting to get our head around it. So the short answer would be, I think there's something there, and I think later this year we're going to be able to start pursuing something meaningful in that arena.
To address Frank's question to you, Steve, what are your thoughts on different ways that you can measure soil organic matter at scale? 1,000 different companies that are all trying to solve this right now. This sounds like a great plug for EMS, but how is that going to be solved at scale long term?
Oh, there's a softball question. Okay, so this is my thinking of how it's going to work. So I think what's going to happen is you're going to have large scale satellite-based systems. They're extraordinarily good for large scale. They have poor pixelation and bad temporal resolution, and crops can mess with them, and soil moisture have problems. So there's always going to be issues, and they're not very good for broken up systems. So they're going to need to be supplemented by some ground truth systems to either tune them or literally ground truth them or go around areas they're having trouble with. There's a lot of different technologies on the market right now. Each one is going to have its problems. If we think about minimal inelastic neutron scattering technology, which measures total carbon, they're going around right now and they're offering to measure all the carbon in a farmer's field. What I'll tell you as a soil scientist, if you're a farmer right now, if you're going to do that, go acidify your soil. You're going to blow off all that carbonate, have them measure it, come back, lime it. Maybe you can find some sugar beets or something, and you're going to drive up that carbonate. So that's a problem. It's going to game that system. The satellites only are always going to be a bit problematic because of their resolution. And then a lot of people here have heard about reflectance near IR. One of my PhD students just finished. I will just direct you to a pretty strong opinion piece by Murray McBride, who literally wrote one of the books in soil chemistry in the world. And I would agree with his assessments that there are significant issues with near IR technology at field scale. And so there's really not a lot of great options at scale. And that's why EMS has landed on this idea. We're going to measure what goes in, what goes out, and then ideally supplement that with teams that are doing remote sensing or weather-based, basically that get that big picture and small picture. I think that's going to be the long-term sustainable solution. That's what I think in terms of that answer. I could be wrong. No, we're still at very early days. Somebody might invent a system that I haven't thought of.
Okay, I think long story short is if you want to nerd out on soil, just reach out to Steve and he can go for a while on it. I'll wrap it up there, Andrea. We can go over to the breakouts, but first of all, I just want to thank Foresight for putting this together and for gathering again such a cool perspective on the crop life cycle with these three companies and great entrepreneurs. So thank you, Ken, Xavier, and Steve for being a part of this too. It was really interesting to learn from you guys today.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everybody.
And thank you to the panel as well. I think that you said it really well at the beginning in terms of agriculture being the solution instead of the problem. I think that it's really a cool message and a very optimistic way to look at driving environmental sustainability in the future. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Really appreciate you coming together with us to have this discussion around clean tech for the agriculture sector. AgriNext moving forward, we are launching our first cohort of AgriNext Venture Training in April, preparing to showcase and do an event around that in July. We will make sure to keep everybody posted on any upcoming activities for AgriNext. But yeah, with that, thank you very much for joining us and hope you have a great day.